WNBA star Brittney Griner and Cherelle Griner are calling it quits. 8 years after the couple tied the knot and 2 years after they welcomed son Bash, Brittney filed for divorce in Georgia's Fulton County Superior Court. At 35 years old, Brittney Griner just filed for divorce from the woman who once fought a Russian court, a foreign government and public opinion itself just to bring her home. 8 years of marriage, 1 2-year-old son, and a documentary that showed the whole world how deeply they loved each other. All of it now sitting inside a Fulton County courthouse file. So what actually happened between the two of them? Stick around because by the end of this video you'll understand where the real story actually stands right now. Nobody saw this coming, not the fans, not the sports media, and certainly not the millions of people who'd spent the previous month watching Brittney and Cherelle Griner sit side by side on a podcast talking about IVF injections and embryo transfers like the closest couple in professional sports. Then, on July 30, 2026, everything changed. Brittney Griner filed a complaint for divorce in the Superior Court of Fulton County, Georgia, and within hours the filing was in the hands of reporters across the country. The petition states that the couple married on June 18, 2018, and had been separated since July 24, just 6 days before the paperwork was submitted. Griner describes the marriage as irretrievably broken with no hope of reconciliation, and is asking the court to grant the divorce outright. She's seeking joint legal and physical custody of the couple's 2-year-old son, Bash, along with an equitable division of marital assets and debts, while asking to retain certain property she considers separate, anything acquired before the marriage or received through inheritance or individual gift. Brittney's attorney, Randall Kessler, offered a short, careful statement once the news broke, that this is a matter the parties hope to resolve privately with no further comment at the time. Representatives for Cherelle Griner did not immediately respond to media requests, and as of now neither side has addressed the filing publicly in their own words. The timing stung for a specific reason. Just weeks earlier, Brittney and Cherelle had appeared together on the And Mom podcast, hosted by WNBA guard Skylar Diggins and broadcaster Cassidy Hubbarth, reflecting warmly on their journey to parenthood through IVF. Days before that, the couple had publicly celebrated Bash turning 2, with both women posting tender birthday tributes that gave no hint of what was coming. There's also a small discrepancy buried in the paperwork. Several outlets had reported for years that Brittney and Cherelle married in 2019, a date repeated across countless celebrity biography pages. The court filing lists June 18, 2018 instead, a reminder of how much of what circulates about this couple online has never actually been checked against a legal document before being repeated as fact. This marks Brittney's second marriage. She was previously married briefly to fellow WNBA player Glory Johnson. At the center of all this sits a 35-year-old, 3-time Olympic gold medalist who has spent more than a decade rewriting what people thought was possible for a woman her size on a basketball court. Griner is a 10-time WNBA All-Star who spent 11 seasons with the Phoenix Mercury before a 1-year stint with the Atlanta Dream in 2025 and a fresh 1-year deal with the Connecticut Sun heading into the 2026 season. She was the first overall pick in the 2013 WNBA draft, and by her second season she'd already led Phoenix to the 2014 WNBA championship, the franchise's third title, sweeping the Chicago Sky in the finals. That same season she set the WNBA single-game blocks record with 11 in one contest and became the first player in league history to dunk in a playoff game. She remains to this day the only player to have dunked in a WNBA regular season or playoff game since turning pro. She's a 2-time WNBA Defensive Player of the Year and currently sits second on the league's all-time blocks list, trailing only Margot Didek. Before any of that, she led Baylor University to an undefeated 40-0 season and a national championship during her junior year, still the only perfect season in the program's history, and finished her college career as the all-time NCAA leader in blocked shots. None of that professional success made the headlines this time. This time it was her marriage. The financial contrast in Griner's career is remarkable. Despite spending roughly 11 WNBA seasons as one of the league's biggest stars, her total WNBA salary over that span barely exceeded $1 million, reflecting the long-standing pay gap between women's and men's professional basketball, a gap the league's newest collective bargaining agreement has only recently begun to close with higher salaries and improved benefits. Griner's income extended well beyond her WNBA paycheck, though. Like many elite players, she earned significantly more through lucrative overseas contracts during the off-season, including a EuroLeague title with UMMC Ekaterinburg in Russia, and supplemented her earnings with endorsement deals, book royalties, and investments in real estate. Her estimated net worth stands at around $5 million. Before we get into who Cherelle Griner actually is, you need to understand just how far she went to bring her wife home from a Russian penal colony, because that history is exactly why so many fans are struggling to believe this marriage has already reached its end. Long before any divorce filing existed, Cherelle Griner was known for one thing above everything else: refusing to give up on her wife when the entire situation looked hopeless. Cherelle and Brittney met years earlier as students at Baylor University, where Brittney was already building a legendary college basketball career and Cherelle was studying political science and government, later adding a minor in family and child studies. They reconnected years afterward, and their relationship grew quietly compared to the public spectacle that would eventually follow. Cherelle went on to study law at North Carolina Central University School of Law, graduating in May 2022. Her identity as a working attorney, now 33 years old, would end up matching more than almost anyone could have predicted just months later. The two got engaged in 2018. In February 2022, Brittney Griner was detained at a Moscow airport after authorities said they found vape cartridges containing hashish oil in her luggage. What followed was nearly 10 months of imprisonment, a Russian court proceeding, and a 9-year sentence that shocked people who'd followed Griner's career for years. Cherelle became the public face of the fight to bring her home, speaking with reporters, meeting with White House officials, appearing at press conferences, and refusing to let her wife's story fade from the news cycle even as the war in Ukraine dominated global headlines at the same time. Cherelle has since spoken about the emotional weight of that period in painfully honest terms, describing how the couple intentionally planned which parts of their long-delayed IVF process they wanted to experience together, a conversation that took on new urgency once it became clear Brittney's freedom was anything but guaranteed. Griner herself later admitted to people that during her detention, she wondered whether the family they'd planned together would ever actually happen, and thought constantly about how she could possibly ask Cherelle to keep waiting through a 9-year sentence neither of them had chosen. Griner was ultimately released in December 2022 as part of a prisoner exchange between the United States and Russia, a swap that traded her freedom for that of Victor Bout, a Russian arms dealer known internationally as the Merchant of Death, a detail that remains one of the more debated aspects of that deal. It's debated partly because of who else remained behind. Marine veteran Paul Whelan, who had been detained in Russia far longer than Griner, was not included in that particular exchange, and the decision to prioritize Griner's release over his drew public criticism at the time, criticism Cherelle and Brittney have both acknowledged directly rather than avoided in later interviews. Whelan was eventually released in a separate, larger prisoner swap in August 2024, alongside journalist Evan Gershkovich. Cherelle's advocacy didn't stop once her wife came home. She continued speaking publicly about wrongful detentions and eventually became an executive producer on the Brittney Griner Story, the ESPN documentary that premiered at the 2026 Sundance Film Festival in Park City, Utah, and gave audiences an unusually intimate look at both women navigating that ordeal together. The two attended the premiere together in January 2026, an event where Brittney was photographed standing and visibly emotional as the audience rose to applaud. Reviewers who saw the film in Park City described it as being just as much a portrait of the couple's marriage as it was a recounting of the detention itself, built around home footage and years of what looked like genuine partnership. Watching that footage now, only months after its premiere and against the backdrop of a fresh divorce filing, creates exactly the kind of contrast that has fans across social media struggling to reconcile the two versions of this story. Strip away the headlines from the past 2 weeks, and what remains is a genuinely detailed public record of a marriage that for most of its existence looked stable, loving, and remarkably open with fans. Brittney and Cherelle's relationship began after Brittney's brief first marriage to fellow basketball player Glory Johnson ended. That earlier marriage lasted barely a year, and Griner filed for an annulment on grounds of duress and fraud before the divorce was finalized in 2016. Griner and Johnson share twin daughters, born in October 2015, though a court later ruled Griner has no biological tie to the girls, since Johnson had conceived using her own egg and a donor's sperm during a period when the two athletes were already separating. By contrast, Brittney's relationship with Cherelle unfolded on a much steadier timeline. According to the marriage date listed in the divorce filing, they'd already been legally married for 6 years by the time they announced they were expecting their first child in April 2024. Bash was born that July, just before Brittney traveled to France to compete for the United States at the Paris Olympics, her third Olympic gold medal, after Rio in 2016 and Tokyo in 2021, added to a summer that already included the biggest personal milestone of her life. The path to Bash wasn't simple or quick. Cherelle has explained that the couple intentionally timed their IVF process around Brittney's WNBA off-season and her own law school graduation, determined to go through the process together rather than delegate it to anyone else. Cherelle has recalled the emotional toll of the hormone injections and the physical strain the process placed on her body, and Brittney has admitted it was genuinely difficult watching her wife go through that discomfort. Their plans were interrupted entirely by the Russian detention in February 2022, then picked back up once Brittney came home, culminating in what Cherelle has described as 3 viable embryos, one of which eventually became their son. Public affection between the two women was a near constant throughout their marriage. Brittney regularly posted tributes to Cherelle around anniversaries, birthdays, and Mother's Day, often crediting her wife's strength for holding the family together during the hardest stretch of her career. Cherelle built her own public identity around motherhood and advocacy, appearing at award shows and public events at her wife's side, including together on stage at the 54th NAACP Image Awards in February 2023, while continuing to practice law in her own right. The couple also attended the Met Gala's Costume Institute benefit together in 2023, while Cherelle was pregnant, and walked red carpets together throughout award season. None of that history has been undone by the divorce filing, and nothing in the court documents suggests any of it was ever untrue. What the filing actually confirms is a narrow set of facts: a marriage date, a separation date, a custody request, and an equitable division of property. Everything else, the emotional context behind why two people who built that much of a life together decided to end it, remains entirely outside the public record and for now entirely private. Here's the part where a lot of entertainment coverage tends to invent certainty that simply doesn't exist, and it's worth being direct about that instead of pretending otherwise. As of the filing date, neither Brittney nor Cherelle Griner has publicly explained what led to their separation. Into the actual cause of a breakup. Brittney's attorney's statement asking for privacy remains the closest thing to an official comment either side has offered, and it deliberately says nothing about motive. That silence hasn't stopped speculation from filling the gap. Some commentary has pointed to the sheer physical distance the marriage endured over the years, Brittney's overseas basketball obligations earlier in her career, back-to-back Olympic commitments, a stint playing in the unrivaled 3-on-3 league, and now a franchise change to the Connecticut Sun for 2026, all of which meant long stretches apart even during the best years of the marriage. Others have pointed to the lingering psychological weight of the Russian detention itself, and experienced reporters covering the couple have documented as reshaping how both women approached stress, parenthood, and their own relationship long after Brittney's release. None of that speculation has been confirmed by either party, and treating it as the definitive answer would be exactly the kind of unverified leap this story doesn't need. What can be said with confidence is this: Brittney Griner filed for divorce in Fulton County, Georgia, on July 30th, citing a separation date of July 24th. She's seeking joint custody of their son, and an equitable division of property, while asking to keep certain separate assets acquired before the marriage. Cherelle Griner has not filed a public response, and no interview, statement, or social media post from either woman has addressed the actual reason behind the split. Anything beyond that right now is speculation dressed up as insight, exactly the kind of thing this couple's own story, one built on years of transparency about an incredibly difficult decade, deserves better than. Fans searching for a single dramatic explanation, an affair, a betrayal, a scandal, won't find one anywhere in the public record. Inventing one to satisfy a headline would do a disservice to two people who have already lived through more genuine hardship than most public figures ever face. It's also worth sitting with how quickly public perception can flip once a single legal filing enters the picture. 2 months ago, Brittney and Cherelle Griner were being celebrated across sports and entertainment media as one of the more openly loving couples in professional athletics. A pair who had survived an international incident together and were still willing to talk publicly about something as private as fertility treatment. Now, the same couple is the subject of divorce coverage built almost entirely around a 4-page legal filing and a handful of old interviews, with very little actual new information to work from. That gap between what fans think they know and what has actually been confirmed is exactly where speculation tends to move fastest, and exactly where it deserves the most scrutiny before being repeated as settled fact. Whatever comes next, a quiet, private settlement or a more public chapter somewhere down the road, the facts that do exist paint a picture of two women who spent 8 years building something real, weathered a crisis most couples never have to imagine surviving, and are now navigating an ending that neither has chosen to explain to the public just yet. Their son Bash remains at the center of both of their filings and both of their public lives, and how his parents choose to co-parent him going forward may end up telling us more about this story than any court document ever will. With this, we've come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content.